So welcome back to my channel, and my channel is Tinashe Nyangari. That's my name and surname. If you are here for the first time, do not forget to subscribe, watch, like, and share. So today we have yet an exciting and informative interview lined up for you. Whether you are navigating legal questions for your business, personal life, or just curious about how the law impacts everyday life, you are in the right place. So stay tuned. Joining us today, I'm with Mr. Amon Tendai Toto, a legal expert. He's based in South Africa, highly experienced lawyer in issues like criminal defense, attorney, corporate law, family law, and all the other types of laws that you may want to hear. And he's got over 24 years of experience in the field, and they've handled a lot of cases, some complex, intellectual, property disputes, high stakes corporate negotiations. And today, he's here to break down all those complex topics in a way that is easy to understand. And in this interview, we'll dive into different topics. For example, how to protect your rights, legal challenges facing businesses today, recent changes in legislation, and of course, we'll also be responding to some questions that we have been getting, like in various groups concerning issues to do with law. So whether you are thinking about hiring a lawyer or you just want to stay informed, this conversation is packed with valuable insights, and you wouldn't want to miss. And now let's just jump in and have Mr. Amon to introduce himself to us and also give us what he has as a law expert. And I'm going to be very careful in this video as well, because, you know, with lawyers, you don't know what you would have said. It can be used against you in the court of law. But today, I have him in front of me to navigate all these issues. So, Mr. Toto, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tinashe. I'm proudly associating to be on your channel, and I hope the insights we are going to share are going to be valuable to the generality of the citizen of the world, and in particular, Zimbabweans in Zimbabwe and those that are living in the diaspora. As a way of introduction, my name is Amon Tendai Toto, born in Rusape, Manicaland province of Zimbabwe. I am a law graduate from the University of Zimbabwe, and I'm also a law graduate from the University of Pretoria, and I'm also a graduate from Tel Aviv University. My credentials are, as Tinashe has spoken about, and I've had experience in the law fraternity and in the international criminal law, corporate and commercial law, labor law, lecturing, a quite wide spectrum of the law, having practiced law in Zimbabwe for the Magistrates Court, Labor Court, Supreme Court of Appeal, and the High Court of Zimbabwe. So that's basically my background. And at the moment, I'm stationed in South Africa as a law consultant in corporate and commercial law, security, and diplomacy. That's all I have now.
Oh yeah,
to
that's
unpack
very
the
rich.
CV. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very rich. And there's a tricky question that I'm going to give you based on social media trends as well, that are around. Maybe before I ask you about what actually led you to think about law or to pursue law in particular. I understand you were also interviewed at some point for becoming a high court judge. Is that true?
Yes, that was in 2015, I think. And well, they required only 5 judges out of 45, and they shortlisted from the interviews 9. And I believe I was one of the 9, but unfortunately, I couldn't make it because the ones that were appointed were way senior to me, and then I was 41.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. So maybe just for some viewers or some listeners who may be thinking of pursuing law, because I understand a lot of people now, even if they graduate with other in other professions, some of them they are now moving into pursuing law and studying law. Maybe I don't know their reasons, but I've seen a lot of people now who are actually practicing, who are taking LLB as a course and to become lawyers. What advice like would you want to give them, maybe if they are considering law as a career?
Yeah, law is not like priesthood that comes with calling. Um, to some, yes, it might be coming with calling, but you may fall short of the required academic qualifications to study law at some institutions. But I always say to people, um, law must not be the preserve of a few. Every citizen, rather, according to me, must be in a position to know basic law. And I've even proposed that basic laws must be taught uh, in our high schools or even from primary school level. Now, those that are studying law from other professions, even military men, we've seen military men from the ZDF and also from some retired from the Air Force. They are also now studying law, even politicians. Law, I think it just forms the basis of human interaction, and more particularly in a constitutional democracy where people must know their legal rights as enshrined in our constitutions and also as we interact with the international community. So it doesn't matter whether you're an engineer, a medical doctor, a veterinary surgeon. I think I don't want to prescribe that law must be
Mhm.
made compulsory, but
Oh,
at
yeah.
some stage, I recommend that every profession or every human being, basically, or a citizen of a particular country, must be given an opportunity to study law so that at least they know the basic laws and also their interactions, whether in business, in their professions, labor relations, and workplace relations. All those things touch on the law. And then leave it to the practitioners to practice the law. But the client must be informed, knowing at least some basic laws that they require a practitioner to defend them on or to represent them on in a particular case. That's my take.
Oh, yeah, yeah. See, that's rich and mouthful. So in terms of the legal profession itself, like as a lawyer yourself, how do you take, like, a typical day of a lawyer? Because I understand there's a lot of reading, there are a lot of issues like concerns that come to you, different people coming with different issues. And I understand that as lawyers, you are people who I often ask to say, is it worth it, like, to say you go, maybe you are supposed to be repenting every day? Because there are people who will be bringing issues. Someone will be telling you that I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I want you to defend me in the courts. So would you want to tell us about your typical day as a lawyer, and also maybe like the most rewarding and challenging aspects of working in the legal field?
Yeah, it might be a long one, but I'll try to shorten it. Uh, a person who has graduated with a law degree, some choose to work in government, whether in the civil division of the Attorney General's office, or others they choose to want to work as magistrates. Others may choose to want to work as state attorneys or state advocates in the Prosecutor General's office. And others choose to go into private practice, representing clients in court, high court, magistrate court, and other adjudicating forums. Others would actually then want to be legal officers at a corporate entity, an NGO, uh, or in government departments other than the ones that I've mentioned, the supra, or that I've mentioned before. So the law is quite broad in terms of a law graduate who has graduated and who wants to find themselves into the into the law industry, as it were. Now, as we go along, it may as well be that one chooses to um, to specialize, whether in corporate commercial law, contract law, banking law, uh, military law, medical law, and all that. So one then chooses later on to specialize, and others quickly don't want to get anywhere else closer to practicing the law in any industry. Others choose academia, where they then study masters, then PhDs, they become professors. We've got renowned professors. I mentioned those in Zimbabwe, Professor Maduku, Professor Washman Nube. Those are, they chose the academia route during their time. We also have other academians who have graduated in my class. I think it's now Dr. or Professor Patrick Masia Kurima, who lectures at one of the esteemed universities in the UK. So it's a matter of choices and opportunities prevailing, especially in certain environments. Like here in South Africa, you find that many law graduates are being just employed in banks as legal officers, others join the NPA and the like, others NGOs. So it's quite and others as researchers for judges. So it's quite a broad spectrum of choices for a law graduate. And then you elevate yourself as you go along, depending on where you started from, and then you progress and then consolidate on what exactly you want to do.
And also in your, I think in your earlier conversation, like there's something you mentioned which also speaks to some misconceptions that people might be having. Are there any other common misconceptions about the legal profession that you may want to clear up for the viewers?
Yeah, I'll concentrate on the on two fronts. One, a lawyer who is in the corporate world as a legal officer. Those lawyers, they are more like compliance officers who ordinarily do routine work. And when it comes to legal representation, they are the conveyor belts from the corporate entity to lawyers that are in practice, briefing them on any matters that may require legal representation in court. However, the misconceptions that are there are the following. One, and maybe I'll just mention two for the sake of our program and time. It is not true that lawyers are highly intellectually capacitated. They've just been in a position to find an opportunity to study law, and a good lawyer is one who knows where to find the law, relate it to the facts that they are looking at, and to apply the law effectively and accurately, and at times creatively, to represent a particular case and to serve the interests of a client. It is not that you have got high grades in say at LLB that you find yourself being renowned as a very good lawyer. You may mature as wine does as you go along and try to streamline. When you streamline, you are now a specialist in a particular area and read more and more, so much that you are not found wanting as a specialist. That you call yourself a specialist or you profess that you are a specialist merely because you studied law. No. And last misconception is that lawyers are constitutional lawyers. That is not true. Not every lawyer is a constitutional lawyer. Everyone else will be saying, I know the Constitution, even if many of them are lawyers or many of us are lawyers. But I'll tell you that it requires a special skill and a special qualification and education for you to be renowned as a constitutional lawyer. And I'll tell you that many of us have failed to interpret the Constitution in an effective and correct manner. And we at times embarrass our clients, we embarrass the audience, and embarrass ourselves failing to interpret and apply the Constitution to prevailing facts and circumstances.
Yeah. So now that leads to my next question. Now, given that you've outlined those misconceptions, because we often hear like a lot of people, a lot of lawyers, they will take jobs that people will be giving them, but at the end of the day, people get shortchanged. So while we are in this conversation, maybe if we talk about the navigation rule when you are navigating the legal issues, what are the most common legal issues that people face nowadays, and how can they prepare to handle such cases? And maybe in your submission, you can also maybe deliberate on how important is it for individuals to have legal counsel before facing legal issues.
Okay. I would say the following, perhaps in an ad hoc manner, without necessarily following the chronology of your question. I would say that common cases during my practice as a junior lawyer and as an intermediate lawyer and as a senior lawyer, they vary from law firm to law firm. Others entertain walk-in clients who have got a simple maintenance case. Some will have bail applications. Some would want to be represented, say, in a criminal matter, and some would want to be represented, say, in a murder case. It then takes some expertise, and it also takes some routine work that is done at that particular law firm. If anybody joins, say, a big law firm that does corporate and commercial law and contract law, they may not even be exposed to know how to represent a client in a maintenance case, or how to represent a client or to handle a case in a labor case. So my encouragement at some stage is that all lawyers must undergo at least a compulsory practicing session of at least not more than 3 years to practice all the varieties and spectrums of the law, so that when they have their own law firms or are employed in a particular law firm, they are able to effectively represent clients in any field of the law that presents challenges. In other cases, if you look at, say, a murder case, if you then throw out a junior lawyer there to deal with a murder case. Murder cases are quite complex. I don't want to take pride in anything, but if you have a lawyer who has represented clients in murder cases and they've got at least a minimum of 3 acquittals, it doesn't take that lawyer to be an ordinary. It requires a lot of concentration and experience. And tutoring by senior lawyers is also very important for young lawyers. We have got so much confidence by young lawyers who believe, or overconfidence rather, who believe that because they've graduated, they now know the law. And they, at the end of the day, throw their clients into the dark end. One of the questions that we have asked is about, say, common errors or less effective ways of representing clients. This is normally out of lack of knowledge, lack of experience, taking things for granted, and lack of supervision from senior lawyers. Otherwise, an average lawyer must know process and procedures of taking instructions from a client, how to charge a client, how to diarize, how to arrange meetings with clients, researching, and also ensuring that you prepare and draft effective and adequate and relevant court process or pleadings in order to represent your client well, whether in a criminal case, labor case, or commercial case.
Okay, so while you still on that, Mr. Toto, so how would one maybe what is it that people may be looking at when they are choosing a lawyer to represent them? What are the red flags that they should avoid when they are choosing a lawyer to represent them in a case? And are there any situations where you would say people can handle their own legal issues, maybe go to court on their own, and be able to win the cases without a lawyer.
Okay. Yeah, like I said initially, my wish really is that every citizen must at least know basic law. In Shona, we have got this statement which goes by Zano Pangwa Uinerako. Zvinoreva kuti, or it means go to consult when you at least have an idea as to what you are going to consult about. If you are not so sure about the advice or the demeanor of the legal practitioner that you have consulted at the first instance, you obviously have your doubts informed by your basic knowledge of the law. Then move on to the next lawyer or ask around who amongst the lawyers in town ordinarily do best in these cases or in this field of study. The challenge that then presents is if a person, an average Zimbabwean, can learn the law and I mean study it and then pass law. I don't think law must be preserved to those that did A level or such other persons that you think they are super intelligent. Even O level students or matriculants can actually study law and then pass law and be very good lawyers. So we must have at least our citizens accessing basic legal aid or basic legal forums where they are taught or knowledge is imparted with regards to basic laws like buying and selling, maintenance law, what are your rights in terms of if you are a child, what are your rights if you are a citizen, what are your rights if you are an elderly, what are your rights if you are a war veteran, for example. So if people are knowledgeable with a knowledge background of the kind of law that they are consulting with a lawyer, they are even able to guide the lawyer to say, no. What I came here for is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I want you to tell me or to impart wisdom on this and that. And are you able to represent me in this circumstance? And you must have a background of the lawyer that you are going to. Perhaps maybe there could be a database of lawyers that are specialized in this, competent in this. It must be made available, say, by the Law Society and given to the general public or to the citizens, so that even when the Law Society is certified that this law firm does ABCD, this one does ABCD, people who have specialized in this are Mr. X and Mr. Z, and give it to the citizens, so that and it's made public, so that when people are approaching law firms and legal practitioners, they are well informed on who is best or who does better in this particular field. I think that can actually cure that particular problem where you end up just getting into a law firm, you are lied to, or the lawyer is not lying to you, but he has got a misconception of the law.
And you also turn up to lose the case when the case you were supposed to win it, or the case was straightforward, but maybe they would have failed to interpret what the client is looking for.
And also rules of procedure. I think I've seen one of the deficiencies that we find in the law fraternity is where cases are lost on technicalities. It is pure ineptitude. People are not following rules. They are not reading, rather. You see, a lawyer will take for granted that I know it all, or I know what I'm doing. But when you get instructions from a client, no matter how simple the case might appear, do research. Visit your law school notes. Go to the internet. Go to the rules of procedure that are prescribed in a particular court, High Court, Supreme Court, or Labor Court, and you would find that there are quite a significant number of cases where people are losing on a technicality. You did not do this on time, and therefore you have lost a case. And yet they've got a very good case to argue. So the prejudice then comes to
I've heard some saying courts are captured. But upon reading, I read somewhere where someone was saying this case was lost on technicalities. Maybe if they had maybe solved those technicality issues, they could have maybe have an argument in the court cases. But the case was not heard like in the courts because they couldn't file the papers properly.
Yeah, that's a matter of procedure which visits the concept of ineptitude of legal practitioners, where they take things for granted, and yet in the court rules, it is required to strictly observe the court rules and bend the court rules by the court on its own accord, what you normally call mero moto, on the basis that the case really deserves the attention of the court on the merits. The courts are unwilling to bend rules or to assist clients and litigants, particularly those that are represented, when their lawyers, who perhaps profess competence and experience in the legal field, fail to do very basic or elementary things to be done in accordance with the procedure. And we normally say in law, where you consult a lawyer, you have entrusted your lawyer, and you and your lawyer are inseparable. So if your lawyer fails to represent you and fails to interpret the law properly or to adhere to court rules, the courts will rule that the courts favor the diligent and not the flagrant. Chitima chinenge chatopfuura, and the court rolls are actually pregnant with many other cases that are deserving their attention, and the courts will not be used to as a law school for say advocates who profess that they know what they are doing, or senior lawyers or junior lawyers who profess that they know what they are doing. The courts, it is not the court's business to start lecturing lawyers on rules of procedure. And winning a case on a technicality is one of the benefits of having a good lawyer.
Oh yeah. So now in terms of the society, that takes us now to the issue of law in the society. In your opinion, how does the law like shape or reflect on our society, especially in Zimbabwe or South Africa? Where do you see like the biggest changes happening in the society because of the law?
It's a bit unfortunate in Zimbabwe that it appears to me that the economy is bad. No one must argue about that. And within a bad economy, you'd find that we are unscrupulous as lawyers. We end up also falling. We end up falling victims to a bad economy, and that bad economy ordinarily or necessarily then affects the quality of legal representation in a country, and the tendencies of just taking cases where you know that you don't have competence, but you just want to receipt some money for purposes of creating cash flows. That said, in Zimbabwe, major cases that I look at now are matrimonial cases. If you check on your statistics, I haven't done that, but I think it's actually the public domain. We've got so many divorces or breakup of marriages that are being handled by the family court in Zimbabwe as a result of either the economy or maybe the advent of technology as an influence as well to break up of marriages, and also the awareness of legal rights by spouses are also influential now to the majority of or some of the cases that we now see as forming the statistics for divorce. We also have issues like custody matters, things to do with child rights and the best interest of children, the guardians, and estates. They are also featuring a lot in the legal domain, and the sale and purchase of immovable property. I've also realized that we are having a lot of litigation around that area, where persons are selling properties to one another. There's no due diligence, and it emerges that perhaps we have got 3 or 4 buyers on one property. We have got also fraudulent title deeds and things like that. So these matters are much and many of them that are inundating the courtrooms of our country. That is to say, the magistrate courts and also the high court. Unfortunately, I haven't heard much about labor cases, but if they are there, they've got something to do with retrenchments and also unlawful dismissal from employment. Those can also feature a lot in an economy that is hamstrung or that is very restricted.
Oh yeah. So now that leads me to the hot potato now of this conversation. I actually like how we are flowing in terms of coming from how you came to the legal fraternity as well, and how people can navigate through and how they can choose a lawyer. So now, given that we have seen all these things happening in the society, especially our case in Zimbabwe, there are a lot of people who have been shortchanged, like we have said. And if we look at maybe criminal law, what rights do people have? Like when we are looking at criminal law, and what is it that they should be aware of when they are arrested or involved in criminal cases?
Yeah, criminal cases, we are faced with political violence cases. We are also faced with cases to do with violation of certain statutes and regulations pertaining mostly on issues like demonstrations against the right to freedom of assembly enshrined in the Constitution, which is in many circumstances taken for granted without necessarily addressing people's minds on what the law says, and that the Constitution, much as it guarantees that right, people must follow certain set rules and regulations in the exercise of such rights, so much that they are not caught up infringing some other statutory laws and regulations. However, not repealed or aligned with the Constitution, it will be a matter of the adjudicating court to make such pronouncements. But whilst you violate that, there's no way you can then expect the police not to arrest you for violating an existing and we call it a living statute, because it has not been repealed, so it is still living. So if you violate that, you don't blame the police that why are they arresting me, and yet this law seems to be not in alignment with a particular right stated in the Constitution. I don't want to dwell on that, but let me then answer the question that people must just know that whilst they have been arraigned or they are dubbed as suspect accused persons, they, yes, have got a right to apply for bail. Uh, they can be detained for a specific number of hours. I think in Zimbabwe it's 48 hours. They are brought to court. Then when you go to court, you have got a right to then apply for bail pending your trial, and the prosecutor general can oppose that bail, and the magistrate is the final arbiter on such matters, using their own discretion on whether or not you are a good candidate to be admitted on bail, having looked at all circumstances, like if you are granted bail, are you likely to leave the country? Are you likely to abscond? Are you likely? Do you have potential or not to come back to court? They balance a lot of factors, including your standing in society, whether you've got resources to flee the country, and if you are uh, able to be brought to court, if you are a juvenile by your parents, all those or your guardian, all those are considerations that are considered by a court when they are now dealing with whether or not to grant you bail. But by and large, that's the inception of the criminal process. But when you are now being tried, you have got a right to choose a lawyer, much as you have got a right to choose a lawyer or to contact your lawyer on arrest. Also, choose your lawyer who is competent in a particular field of the law, especially if it's a criminal case. We have got criminal lawyers that are renowned in Zimbabwe. I wouldn't mention names because some of them I'm not too sure whether I've interacted with them for the past 5 years. So I don't know whether they've retained the same competence or not. But like I said, it is important to shop around and then be represented by a lawyer who is effective, who know what they're doing, and who have got greater experience in the type of cases on which you have consulted them on.
So often we hear people talk about corporate law. When you don't know about this a law, jargon, the law jargon, you hear about corporate law. But in that corporate law, I understand it entails businesses. What are the biggest legal risks? And maybe in your response, you may want to explain, to the people about the corporate law. Like, what are the biggest legal risks that people may face in their businesses, and how can they mitigate those?
Okay, corporate law specifically relates to, or it speaks about the governance of a legal entity, which is a company, a cooperative, a trust, or such other non-breathing entities, and their relationship with one another, and also how they are constituted, and issues around governance within that particular entity. That's when we deal with corporate law, including the merging of two legal entities. We normally get to know things like mergers and acquisitions. That's part of corporate law. Commercial law relates to the interaction between individuals, corporates, government entities in corporate, not in corporate, but in business dealings or in transactions or in contracts. That's the difference between corporate law and commercial law. So the two of them, people normally say there's corporate and commercial law. They are trying to say we have got corporate law that relates to entities, their governance, and their composition. And commercial law then it now relates to the business interactions of buying and selling, or buying and selling, or even of shares. It now goes in the domain of corporate contract. Commercial law and contract law as between individuals or entity to entity, whether it's private or it's government. We are now dealing with commercial law.
Okay, so intellectual
many
property
issues
law.
that arise.
Okay, you can go ahead. Yeah.
Intellectual property law, it pertains to the protection of IP, of your innovation and creativity, or if you believe that you want to do X that is unique, you then register that, and then it is protected. That is when we deal with intellectual property.
Okay, so when dealing with intellectual property, I think most people, especially those who are now engaging in business, they would want to hear about how best can they protect their properties. I often hear people say you have to write a will, for your things not to have issues when you die or when you pass on. But I've heard some circumstances where a person would have written a will, but then that will maybe get contested or people do not follow the will. What's your advice there to people who are listening to say, what is it that you would advise them to say this is the most efficient way one can protect themselves from people who are gullible, especially after someone passes on?
Okay, I would want to separate some issues here, but separating them as follows. when you are running a business, you are either a shareholder or you are a managing director or you are just a director in a company. And I must make a distinction here that many people believe or think that because you are a director in a company, you are effectively an owner of the business or you are a shareholder. Those are two different things. Shareholders are separate from directors in the corporate world, but there are directors that may be shareholders in a company as individuals or using their proxy companies to own shares in a company that they are managing or in a company that they are directors or they are appointed as directors. So if that is the case, the shares then constitute your interests in that particular company where you are now earning income out of what is happening in that particular business. If that is in your individual capacity or you are a shareholder, I think let me restrict that to that topic. So much that you have acquired wealth through that process of you being a shareholder in this company and shares are doing well. And when you die, obviously that forms part of your estate. Just like your house, just like your car, just like your farm, and any other movable assets. Now, the challenge that is facing many people is that they are failing to separate themselves from business entities and also failing to realize that as you are living from hand to mouth or as you are creating wealth, that wealth is separated from you when you die. And it is now the wealth that belongs to your dependents. That is when people are informed to say, okay, in order to insulate the gullibility of the world or the communities, whether it's a family and all that, people are advised then to write wills. Last wills is the last will and testament. But in Zimbabwe, we've got the Wills Act and the Succession Act of Zimbabwe. We also have Deceased Persons Family Maintenance Act, among other, and including the Administration of Estates Act. All those that I have spoken about, they become easier when you have got a valid will. When you say, if I die, I want my estate or my wealth to be distributed in this manner, and the will must be valid in terms of the Wills Act. Now, often wills are contested because they are not compliant with the prescribed regulations in the Wills Act, and the contestation may end up in the High Court, where the master is cited as a party because all all estates are administered by the master of the High Court, although he is also represented by assistant masters in magistrates' courts and the like. So it is advisable to consult lawyers that deal with deceased estates, perhaps as a specialty, and also read the Wills Act for yourself and to see whether or not a particular will that you want to depose to is compliant with the law, for fear of contestation tomorrow when you die. So this is one of the circumstances where you find the wills being contested. It is because they are invalid for non-compliance. However, if there's an intention to draft a will and the will is not contested by anybody or the wishes of the deceased, however invalid the will may be, if the dependents, the greater dependents of the deceased who want to inherit his wealth have no disputes with regards to my wishes and desires, that then becomes a guideline to how the estate is going to be dissolved and to be distributed. But if there is no valid will, which is not registered with the master of the High Court, and others that are contested as such in the way, then that becomes a problem because the wishes and desires of the deceased may not carry the day, because what you wrote there is the document that contains what you wrote there is one invalid, and some others then take advantage of the invalidity to then contest and be gullible in order to benefit justly or unjustly from the estate of a deceased person.
Okay, so how does one ensure that a will is valid? I heard you talking about validity. I just thought a person would just write and say, maybe Mr. Toto, I want to have a will. Then they write what they want, they give it to Mr. Toto as the lawyer. How does it become valid? Do you mind explaining that one?
Yeah, I think I'll give you the catch ones. The will must be deposited by a living person. Is it sorry to be to be funny a bit, because a will never be deposited by a dead person. And in Zimbabwe, we've got soldiers' will, we've got last wills and testament, which are done by me. And when I depose to a will and approaching a lawyer must interview the the um, the depositor of the will or the person depositing to the will, and guide them in terms of the law that are in terms of succession laws of Zimbabwe, in terms of the Deceased Persons Family Maintenance Act of Zimbabwe, and the administration of deceased estates as the major legislations. What you want is compliant with these laws, or what you want in terms of what you want your estate to be dealt with is not consistent with the law. Because should you then just proceed to draft a will with certain wishes and desires that are not consistent, or they are not in line with the legislation that I have spoken about, that will may be subject to contestation. Now, having guided the client as such, you then listen to their wishes. You may even tell them to come back, of course, for another consultation. Yes, we'll charge you for that. But you tell them in the consultation that the law says A, B, C, D. What you wanted is not consistent. Can you go back, if you can, to rethink on whether or not you want to disinherit your spouse? You know that a will can be contested on the basis that it disinherits a spouse, unless there's evidence to demonstrate that the disinheritance was just and equitable.
Okay. So
Yes.
a person can write a will and think that maybe in their will they now remove maybe the spouse unknowingly. Then now the spouse will come back and say, no, this person, I've been living with him for so many years, but now in his will he never included me. That person can actually challenge and can win the case. Yeah.
Yes, it can be, unless there is contrary evidence to demonstrate that the exclusion of this spouse, Mr. Toto, was on the basis that he attempted to murder, or he conspired to murder me, and therefore I have no just cause to retain this person as a beneficiary of my estate. These are some of the circumstances where evidence may be laid to that effect. But ordinarily, in the absence of evidence, it is true that disinheriting a spouse can be a factor or cause for contestation of a will. And the person who has been disinherited can actually win a particular matter, because in terms of the Wills Act, I believe there is a particular clause or section that actually mentions about disinheritance and the circumstances under which disinheritance can take place, in circumstances under which disinheritance can be contested.
Yeah. So in terms of an estate, how do you maybe people would want to hear from you? There are some who are saying registering maybe an estate is better than writing a will. Which one would you advise to say this is the best way of protecting your legacy? A will, or maybe registering assets into an estate?
Okay. Yeah. When I was speaking, I think it slipped me when I spoke about you having shares in a company, separating directors from shareholders. Now, if you have amassed some significant wealth, you can register a trust. You can register a family trust where you then transfer certain assets forming your wealth into that particular trust. Then you appoint trustees that will manage the affairs of that trust. And you then appoint or nominate beneficiaries of that trust. A trust can still be a living entity even when you are still living. It has got the effect of protecting those assets from your individual person and what you may do attracting liability that can deplete your wealth. So you can register as a trust in order to insulate against that, for example. And the trust also can actually house your assets or your wealth. And the trustees are acting in the best interest of the trust and the dependents or beneficiaries nominated in that particular trust. Now, the trust is actually done by by notary public. A deed of trust is drafted and it is attested to by notary public, who must be a legal practitioner, of course, and then it must be registered with the deeds office. And this administration must strictly follow what is stated in the deed of trust, annual meetings, accounts, audited accounts, and things like that. So that's one way you can, even when you die, the trust will take care of your funeral and the trust will continue looking after or providing for the beneficiaries, unless the trust then says the sponsor, who is yourself, the owner of the wealth, having formed the trust, if you die, some trust will actually then specify in the deed of trust to say, in the event that the president or the chairperson or the sponsor of this trust or the donor, as it were, passes on, the trust will dissolve. And when it dissolves, the trustees are directed to send that asset to John, that asset to Peter, to Mary, and to aunt or to brother. That can be contained in a deed of trust, and with specific clauses that say, in the event that the donor or the sponsor dies, then the trust must be dissolved. And when it is dissolved, assets of the trust must be distributed in this manner: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in the absence of that, it means the trust can only be dissolved in terms of its constitution, or it can be a living trust which goes for generations and generations, benefiting the beneficiaries. And also, perhaps it would have been mentioned that should the beneficiaries die, their siblings will then benefit. Their trust to that effect, the roads trust, the Tendai Toto trust can actually say that. So that's one way of dealing with certain assets when you die. The other one is you do a will, as I have stated. And the will must be compliant, must be valid, and must be registered or can be registered with the master of the High Court. I think it's for about $25 or so. And make sure that if you do your will or if you deposit your will for purposes of minimizing or mitigating upon challenges, you must register it with the master of the High Court, and provided it is compliant with the Wills Act and the other inheritance laws of the Republic. Now,
okay, so
that is a will.
yeah, you can go ahead.
And if you die without a will, or you die with having attested to a will, we normally say a person who dies without a will, we say they have died intestate, which means they've died without a will. Now, it is imperative to then register the estate with the master of the High Court. And even if you die with a will, you still register the estate of the deceased with the master of the High Court. It becomes easier for the master to follow what was stated in the will as they are administering the estate and dissolving it. It may become complex to dissolve an estate, and conflicts ordinarily are there or may be there if there is no will, because it is now a subject of contestation on who must get what and who must get what. That's the distinction. Yeah.
So a person can run with a will and the trust together. Can it happen that
Yes.
way?
Yes, it can.
Okay, then put other assets in a trust, then put some of the things in a will, and they can be used when the person deceases. Like, maybe
Yeah.
he's got some movable properties that he doesn't want to include in the trust.
Yes. Like if you have got a trust, you can choose to say, look, which assets do I want to donate to the trust? And say you have got an immovable property, say a farm, but that's your legacy. You want to live for time immemorial. You can put that particular one as a heritage or as a legacy in a trust rather than putting a car in a trust. A car, you can include it in a will because those are movables and they may not have a particular legacy in them. But if you have got a particular car, like my Bentley, I can put it in a trust because I want people, and even my with instructions that it must not be sold, for my grandchildren to know that at one time our grandfather drove a Bentley.
Oh yeah, yeah, I see. So in terms of the family law, I see our time may be running out. The family law, I'm seeing a lot of people like they're being shortchanged because of my marriages and all that that fall apart, the divorces and that kind of stuff. What should individuals know about navigating legal issues related to marriage, divorce, and child custody? Because I've seen, like, now we are seeing the cases that are trending on social media about some children who were not or who are not taken care of because maybe the father, Amonte Toto, he had another wife, they sired children, and then the one who came in now gets a marriage certificate and uses it to punish the children who do not even know anything about what these people have, like, in their marriages. What advice would you give people concerning the issues to do with family law?
Um, well, obviously, I'm responding to when I'm deceased, as it were, and to make sure that
Mhm.
even if I demise or I'm deceased, the children born out of wedlock or such children that are not in situ, as it were, living with me when I die with the current wife or the in situ wife. Um, the the issue here is it's not complex to me because we have got the Deceased Persons Family Maintenance Act. If a child was dependent upon its father, or if anybody was dependent, even your parents were dependent upon you, and should you die and they prove that they were dependent upon you, they must apply for maintenance against the estate. And a court can order the estate to pay a lump sum amount to a particular family of the deceased because they were necessarily dependent on that person under the Deceased Persons Maintenance Act. Even your mother can actually claim maintenance when you die under that particular act, Deceased Persons Family Maintenance Act. That's one legislation that is living and that can be utilized under those circumstances. But for fathers,
Okay.
we need to also ensure that even mothers, let's provide for children that are not in situ and that are not born in wedlock. They are still your children. They were dependent on you. And you must not create circumstances where those children will be deprived of maintenance or their upkeep and welfare merely because you have died. You will be a Mbinga here and siring children everywhere in Marlborough, Borodale, Chitungwiza, and Glenora. And the moment you die, those children are destitute. But the mothers of those children or guardians of those children, they can go to court and apply suing the estate, your estate, or the administrator of your estate to say, we were dependent on this person and now he has died, let's have a portion of his estate so that we send children to school and so that our children can also live a, a better life even beyond the death of their parent.
Oh yeah. So now, as we are wrapping up this show, Toto, I'm seeing that we have spent a bit of time. Of course, I know there are a lot of issues that we may need to discuss, and we may consider having another show. And I would love people maybe to put in the comment section when they watch this video about the things that they might want you to respond to. And given that you're in South Africa, are you able to do due diligence for people, let's say those who would want to get properties in South Africa?
Yeah, there's risk due diligence, legal due diligence, and commercial due diligence. It is necessary to do that prior to purchasing anything, whether movable or immovable. You may buy stolen property, or you may find yourself buying a property that has been sold to 3-5 persons. There's need to do deed search and also to search on other platforms that list properties and identify buyers that are on the waiting list and other buyers that have already paid money that are on the pending list. And you must not be in the queue in those circumstances. Otherwise, you would have deposited money into a real estate agent that may not be recovered. And those estate agents may end up being liquidated, and your money is actually in there on the waiting list of such property. So it's important for due diligence to be done, and only pay money when a due diligence report has been produced. You are cocksure that this particular property is unencumbered, it has got no double buyers or double sales, and we can do that for you. And obviously outsourcing to other players who are specialists in that field.
Yeah, that's fine. So I will share your details in the description of this video for those who may want to contact you, especially in South Africa. I understand a lot of people, especially those who are living in the diaspora, they are considering buying properties in South Africa and also maybe doing some businesses in South Africa. It's good for Zimbabweans anyway to trade across. And then as we wrap up, Mr. Toto, what would you say? Like for someone who is watching this video, what's one thing? What's the one thing that you would want them to take away regarding legal matters? And where can people follow you? Your work, and how can they contact you? I've said I'll share, yes, of course, your business contact. But where can they get you if they want to seek legal advice? As you'll be responding to the first question, giving your final thoughts.
Okay. Like I said, I'm a law consultant with Legal Support Network. I'm a director there. We do legal consultants, business consultants, and corporate and commercial law consultants, risk and security. We are here in South Africa. I give you my consent to share my contact details with anybody who may want to, and even email address, who may want to reach out and to present their problems. I'm available to offer to some extent for a fee and to some extent for free on such matters that anybody may want to ask. That will actually assist us to in our quest for contribution to Zimbabweans and citizens who are in the diaspora who may want to utilize our services and our expertise for any purpose in the realms of our consultants. So you are free to share my contact details with them, and also our website, which I'll send it to you. They can ask questions there. I'll be able to respond. Others, I would then insist that I don't want to answer questions on WhatsApp. I may insist that they may have to do a proper email, which details full facts of the matter, and I would insist that people must give full details and adequate briefing, not drips and pieces. Otherwise, if I give you an opinion, you may end up thinking that the opinion is inaccurate. Why? Because you retained certain vital information, volunteer information generously, then we guarantee confidentiality, then we can respond to you adequately after proper research, and we give you opinions.
Yeah, that's fine. That's mouthful. So thank you so much, Mr. Montendai Toto, for showing up for this video, which is very insightful. And I think for the viewers and listeners, it's very important to do due diligence in everything that you can. There are a lot of issues that we dwelt upon, issues to do with legal matters, family law, corporate law. Of course, we didn't dive into detail. I know we can talk about corporate law the whole day. We can talk about family law the whole day. We can talk about, the property issues the whole day. So I really value the time that you have given me and to interview you and explore the questions that we may have concerning legal matters. So once more, thank you so much for gracing the show, and hoping to have you in the next session, which is going to be, I think people who will be watching this video are the ones who are going to give us direction of things that they may want to know, and we put it in the public domain. So if anyone is new on this channel, don't forget to subscribe so that we'll be able to bring you more. And if you subscribe, put in the comment section of things that you may want to know. It's all in the public domain. That is why we made it publicly. So thank you so much, Mr. Toto, for affording us the time, and also for responding to the questions using your due diligence as well as a lawyer. Thank you so much. See you in the next video.
Thank you.
Okay.